teachers of Reddit, what's the worst case of helicopter parenting you've ever encountered?
I was taking a general chemistry lab in college, and a parent emailed me after the first lab report with an annotated copy of the graded assignment, which I gave a B+. Little Johnny had never gotten a B in a class before, and I was just being unfair since it was his first semester in college. Long story short, she threatened to go to the prof. I said go ahead, and they did. The professor was awesome. When kids bitch about their grades, he offers them a regrade, and then goes over the report with a fine-toothed comb. The B+ got changed to a C. Back when I was teaching, I gave a bad grade on a test to a 55-year-old woman who was taking the class. Her 80-year-old mother came to my office the next day with scones and tea to ask me if her daughter could retake the test. I allowed it. Told a lady at work about an interesting app that allows you to lock your child's phone anytime you want, and the only option it gives them is to call the preset parents number. The lady who designed it was pissed because she would call or text her children, and they wouldn't answer, so it allowed her to lock their phones until they called and checked in. My coworker immediately downloaded the app, and now if she calls or texts her kids and they don't respond within 2 minutes, she locks their phones. If her kids are on Reddit and see this, I would like to apologize. I just thought the article was interesting and was making small talk. I did not intend to ruin your teenage years. I work at a small school, and we have a student whose mom is the worst helicopter mom I've ever seen. At the start of each school year, mom emails all of the students' teachers with a list of expectations, which include handing back all assignments, regardless of length, within the week unless the assignments were received on Friday, in which case they need to be handed back on Monday. Other expectations include always being ready for mom to drop in for a meeting, as mom believes that teachers who require appointments are really just trying to buy time to prepare a story for her. She has sent abusive emails to colleagues that have been so bad. The principal has told several teachers at the school not to allow contact with mom without him present. When I had the student, mom came to me and demanded I cancel a student club I had running in my room so she could review in detail each correction I had made on her student's paper. When I told her I'd be happy to review it but wouldn't cancel the club, she accused me of violating her students' FERPA rights and reported me to my principal, who can't stand this woman. My favorite story, from a coworker not in my department, is when the student's mom came in without an appointment to demand from a much older, battle-seasoned teacher that he change her student's final exam grade to a higher grade, because the student's score made them just ineligible for 4.0 honor roll. The student had something like an 89.93 in the class, and when mom went in to argue, I remember being in the hall and hearing the teacher yell, "Are you out of your goddamn mind, missus? Get the hell out of my classroom." She walked out rather shaken, muttering something about the ALU. That teacher is now the staff hero. Edit. It probably would have been useful to mention earlier that the teacher who yelled at her has a very, very clear policy about not rounding up grades. He puts it in his syllabus and has told every class about it at the beginning of the year for as long as I've worked with him. Sorry for the lack of context. Carry on. I worked as a college ambassador during undergrad. Part of this meant I ended up at events with prospective students and their families to tell them about all of the great things we did. This was a fancy one where there was dinner served, and we're each assigned to a different table with 2 to 3 families. I always try to talk to the kids and try to connect with them, but this kid, we'll call him Brad, was the hardest case I've ever had. Every time I would talk to him, he would make eye contact with me, then look at his mom. She would answer every question I could ask. What's your favorite class? What are you looking forward to the most? All were answered by mom. Then, of course, because Brad wasn't asking me any questions, she decided to start asking me questions about my college experience. This is when she told me of his life plans. He, too, was going to be a resident advisor in college, and he was going to graduate in 3 years so he could go to med school at Harvard, and he was going to get married to high school girlfriend's name before med school started. You could see the kid just try to shrink away. I used to teach at a private primary school in China, basically for rich kids. Many of the children have no brothers or sisters and suffer from little emperor syndrome. One little girl was very bossy. At home, she had servants and was used to ordering others around, even adults. To give you some perspective, I've seen kindy kids hit and kick their minders while the minders grin frighteningly. If that kid complains to mommy, they are out of a job. So at school, she tried to give orders to the other little girls and boys. As you can imagine, this did not go down very well with the other kids, especially as they themselves were all quite well off. So her entire class refused to play or talk with her. This caused the little girl to cry and complain to mommy. Her mommy marched into our office and in front of our principal threatened to have the other children killed unless they started playing with her daughter. The principal was shocked. He was the one who informed me. Another mother asked me how dare I give her son 63% on an exam. As I was still new to China at the time, I just looked at her puzzledly as I couldn't understand how daring came into it. I thought you just gave people what they got. My mom has always been semi-helicopterish. I played sports all my life, and there were so many times where she almost ran on the field. It all came to an end a couple years ago. I had gotten kicked out of school and was living at my dad's house. He knew I had been kicked out, but I asked him to not tell my mom. So, the semester after that, he gets a call from his work saying he has to move to Singapore for a couple months, then move for an unknown period of time. This means I have to move in with my mom. Since getting kicked out, I have kicked my own ass into gear and have been receiving straight ass. So, for the next semester, I am able to keep it a secret until one day while she's yelling at my sister over the phone about some bullshit and my sister says something along the lines of, "You're angry at me for this, but Wu-Tang Wizard has been kicked out of school for a year." I am upstairs when this happens and have no clue until I get a text from my sister saying, "I accidentally told mom you got kicked out, sorry." So I sit there for a couple minutes, shitting myself, waiting for her to come raging upstairs. When she finally came up, it was probably the most level-headed conversation I've had with her, and she basically just said, "I'm sorry that you felt so uncomfortable that you had to hide this from me." I told her that I'm already on track to getting back into college next semester, and have handled the situation entirely on my own. And like magic, helicopter mom vanished from my life, and only cool mom remains. I worked as a member of my department's advising center while working on the doctorate. We had 1,000 plus undergrads, so there were 3 grad assistants and 1 PhD working the place. It was a daily occurrence for at least one of us to have to convince a prospective student and parents that our institution was right for them. Normally, this was not hard. We kept the hard data right there on cheat sheets about what we had tracked with retention rates, graduation rates within 4 years compared to the national average, FAQ of parental questions, and the sort of awards that department faculty and students had won at the local, national, and international level, as well as success stories by former students. In all seriousness, we prided ourselves on being able to sell the program without having to lie like a lot of campus recruiters do. One day, the other grad assistants called off sick, hungover on a Monday after the weekend, and my boss was getting ready to see what he described as a pretty bad helicopter dad, at least from the phone, and his boy when he got a call from the department chair. One of our faculty members had a relative have a heart attack in another state, and she had to go sit by her relative's side. Thus, my boss ended up covering her class at the chair's request, and I ended up with the parent. When helicopter parents come into the advising center with their prospective student, the first thing you do is to try and engage the person who will actually be coming to the university. Not only is it polite, but it gives a good idea of just how the rest of the interview will go. I knew exactly how bad this was going to be when the parent cut me off mid-introduction to his son with, "Don't you talk to him. I'm the one asking the questions here." It's an automatic red flag that the parent is the one wanting the kid to go to college to begin with, and is making all the decisions. Usually, to be blunt, these kids will get accepted. but do horribly their first semester or two of freedom from such tight constraints, sometimes even ending up on academic probation as a result. I gave the father my best smile. 3/4S of teaching is theater for a reason, and that also applies to these sorts of meetings. Our session went on for an hour and 30 minutes. What follows are snippets I recall. Snippet 1. Well, at smaller university with horrible rankings, they have concentrations in corrections and law enforcement. Why don't you offer that? Well, sir, I've actually got their model schedule right here, courtesy of their website. You'll notice that it only comes out to a one-class difference between their concentrations, whereas we offer equivalent courses here as electives. Snippet 2. Well, what if he wants to double major in another major? Here's a form with the requirements for our major. Due to the way the general studies fall and the amount of credits we put aside for a minor, if combined with the free electives, your son could still graduate from here with a double major between criminology and any of these: psychology, sociology, safety science, philosophy, or political science. But what if he wants to double major in Spanish? That would be completely doable, except that Spanish requires 2 years/4 semesters before they let you do the study abroad. And you have to do the study abroad for the Spanish BA at this institution. Snippet 3, almost at the very end of our conversation. So what if my son doesn't want to become a social worker, a federal employee, a probation officer, a prison guard, a cop, a security guard, go to graduate school, work with juveniles, or go to law school? Honestly, sir, then he needs to talk to another major. And then the guy quite rudely informed me there was no way in hell his son was majoring in criminology, and he wanted to go bug chemistry so his son could be one of those CSI guys. By that point I was drained, had already laid out the best plans for how to plot a path to law school post-undergrad graduation, how to find graduate assistantships in grad schools if the kid went for his master's, etc. Holy shit, this is my time to shine. I live in a place notorious for helicopter parents, and I witnessed possibly the worst case of it ever last year teaching in a kindergarten. The poor kid was about 2.5 years old and was just starting pre-K. And at my particular school, we have a system where the parents can stay for a settling-in period. The kid and his mom entered the school a few weeks late, and initially the lead teacher and I were like, oh, okay, we will give them a few extra weeks to settle. So we didn't push for any sort of separation. Then we started noticing things. The kid would drink from a baby bottle with a rubber teat. This is really damaging to children with teeth, so should be weaned after 9 months or so. The kid couldn't eat properly and would retch and spit up food all over the table. The mom broke up all of his food into tiny little crumbs so he could eat them. Every time the kid answered questions from the teacher, usually small grunts and half words like "but" for bus, she would clap enthusiastically and praise him immensely, which actually interrupted the lesson and distracted the lead teacher. In 30-degree heat, the mom would send the kid to school wearing 4 to 5 layers of clothing: vest, undershirt, t-shirt, school uniform, and school jacket. She didn't want him to get cold in the air-conditioned classroom. When we eventually got her to leave the classroom, she would stand right outside the door and look in through the window to watch what we were doing. When we politely asked her to sit in the lobby, she would say, "No, it's okay," and spend the whole 2 hours just standing outside. When her kid acted up in class and we told him off, her head would pop through the door and one of us would have to tell her that we are professionals and we can handle disciplining her poor child. Sometimes she would peer through the window velociraptor style and try and figure out if we were abusing her poor baby. During parent consultation, she said that we didn't ask her kid enough questions in class and we didn't like her child at all. She accused us of not spending enough time with him and ignoring him. This is a class with 3 other children on the autism spectrum already, and just me and the lead teacher. She also said she particularly didn't trust me and said that her kid hated being at school. Her child absolutely adored me, and we ended up improving his behavior dramatically. This poor kid had a severe speech delay because when he was a baby, his mom says he choked on food and almost died. so she was too afraid to give him real food for his entire life until he came to pre-K. She also spoiled him rotten and never encouraged him to speak properly. So on top of having poor jaw muscle tone, he learned that going CAH and but were real words. Anytime we took him to the toilet, she would appear out of nowhere and watch the entire procedure. Just in case I don't know. It was pretty sickening that she didn't even trust us, and I don't want to think about what she thought we were up to. As the year went on, we, with the aid of Asenko, eventually managed to get this kid to eat by himself without spitting up or choking on his food. But one of us would have to sit next to him to make sure his mom didn't accuse us of neglecting him if she looked through the window. He eventually started to gain a lot of independence and would eagerly tell his mom boo-bye when he sat down for circle time. His mom would spend the next 10 minutes backing out of the classroom, rushing towards him for any reason such as to readjust his legs so he would sit properly, or to tissue down his face, or attach his name badge, or to tell him to answer the teacher, or any other excuse to just stay in the classroom 1 minute longer. After a while, this kid would cry when he saw her come in the classroom. I personally think it was because he enjoyed class so much without her looming over him all the time, and she would use that as an excuse to come inside and soothe him. It was fucking ridiculous. Finally, the year ends and we talk about this kid entering K1 and the likelihood that he will need a special needs shadow teacher to help him with his speech delay and encourage his independence. She asks us if we can install CCTV in the classroom and have it broadcast on the internet so that she can watch and make sure that the hired shadow is doing their job and caring for her boy. When we refused outright, she asked if she could once again sit outside the K1 classroom and watch. "Absolutely not," said the principal, finally stepping in when she should have back when the kids started. I really wonder how things are gonna go when this mom comes back in September. My coworkers have theorized that she may or may not put an audio recorder in his school bag so she can listen in, or one of those creepy nanny cams on his clothes. As an extra note, we had the kid looked at by our resident Senko, and she assessed him pretty thoroughly over the year. She summarized that he probably didn't have any particular learning disability because he could focus in class and was pretty much at the right level for his age. It was just his speech delay and gross motor skills that were behind. I often wonder whether these delays were a product of nature or nurture, but who is to say for sure? Here goes. I taught multiple subjects at the high school level in special education for about a decade. Most people who aren't in the field hear special ed and think, well, retarded. And while we did have the occasional student who was in fact mentally retarded, the majority of our students were emotionally disturbed, PTSD, compliance disorder, Asperger's, etc. Most were in and out of juvenile hall, depressed, suicidal, etc. What you learn quite quickly is that the parents of these kids were almost always far more fucked up than their kids. So fast forward to about 5 years into my career, and a new student is introduced into my homeroom. Let's call him Robin Aaron. Got reference? And yes, it's going exactly where you think it's going. So Robin comes into class on his first day, nearly hanging off his mother's arm like a baby possum. Robin is very small for his age. He's 16 but looks and sounds like he's 10. Apparently Robin was expelled for making threatening phone calls to his previous teachers and lighting a kid's backpack on fire. Robin is quite the pyro. So Robin has a myriad of disorders, both real and ones his parents made up to explain the results of their shitty parenting job, including delayed puberty, which has caused his stunted growth and voice tonality. Mom seems nice. Explains that Robin is a very special boy and has a big heart. She talks at length about how proud she is of her little buddy, and I begin to notice that she is consistently speaking about him and to him as if he were 6 years old. She wipes some chocolate, I hope, from his lip at one point, and he does the mom thing. I'm constantly shooting glances over her shoulder to the vice principal, a friend of mine. Standing behind her, she returns the WTF? Glares. Cut to about 5 months later. I'm working with the class on a math project in which they had to come up with a real-world word problem that they encountered recently establish what formulas could solve it, and then blah blah blah. So anyway, I walk over to Robin's desk and he is coloring with crayons. A weird picture. I can't quite make it out. Hey Robin, why don't you tell me about the scenario you're trying to solve here? He is excited. I'm so good with kids. This is when I slept in mommy's bed because I was scared and she would nurse me.
Ok.
That's different. Well, Robin, I explain. I asked that the scenario that we are going to use math to solve be a recent one.
Ok.
How about we shoot for, say, the last couple weeks? I don't want you guys using really old ones from when you were a little kid because you might not remember. This was a couple weeks ago. Why can't I use it? That's not fair. He's got his lower lip tucked in, bobbing his little Adderall-addled head back and forth whilst coloring still.
I'm sorry.
A couple weeks ago, I watched Final Destination 3, and then that night I got scared, so I went to my mommy's bed and told her I wanted her to nurse me and sleep in her bed. I don't do it all the time, but sometimes I get really scared. So naturally, I think he's bullshitting me, which is odd, because so far he has been painfully honest and forthcoming with every bizarre detail. I go to his on-site therapist and ask him to speak to Robin. He does. Robin confirms to the therapist that this is a once-in-a-while thing that his mom has done to make him feel safe, and it has been happening since he was a little kid. We go to the VP. VP goes to principal. CPS report filed. Turns out the mother admitted it to be true. She said it helps him calm down and, I quote, "Ain't no one gonna tell me how to raise my baby." Well, Lisa Aaron, the state of California disagrees. Have both the best and the worst. Neither were mine, though. This was about 6 years ago. The best, not mine, but a colleague student. Decent student, solidly average, didn't hand in his final paper. WTF? She thought. And then she received an email from his mom. Can get an extension on his paper? We're aware it was due this week, but this weekend he was jumped while heading home from a bar. I understand this is really odd. I wouldn't email my son's professors unless it was absolutely necessary. Picture included with the email. Kid's face is bloody, cut, and swollen. Totally got the extension. The worst, a student of another colleague. We were sitting around marking papers when he bursts into hysterical laughter. Colleague 1. Can anyone make sense of this sentence? It's not even a thing. This is an anti-thing. He reads it to us. It's half a rant, half 8th grader gibberish. Colleague 2. Oh my god. I just read that exact same thing. She flipped through a stack of papers and pulled it out, compared, and it's basically the exact same paper by the same student submitted to 2 separate classes. Totally counts as academic dishonesty, and that's explicit in the outline. It has to be original work for the class. The 2 of them take the papers to their professors. They agree. It goes straight to the department head as a case of plagiarism. Student is completely livid. He's clearly a genius. Everyone else is a moron for even questioning his work, and he'll have our heads and our jobs for this. He schedules a meeting with the department head, like he's supposed to, and the day finally comes. And this smug, chubby little fucker struts, fully suited up, and right behind him is Uncle Sleazy Lawyer, complete with matching suit and briefcase to boot. We can hear the student muttering as he stomps down the hallway about how he's going to be a great legal mind one day because his uncle told him so, and he was totally going to show us all. It was all I could do not to laugh. They go into the office, close the door, and Uncle Lawyer loudly declares for all to hear, "My client has prepared a statement before we begin." Department head, "No." Student, "But it's my right." Department head, "No." Student, "But." Department head, "No." We couldn't hear anything after that. We had to close our own doors so we could laugh. He was disciplined appropriately, though. All the professors knew who that student was from that point on. And this is the end of today's video. I hope you liked it, and don't forget to comment an anecdote or experience similar to the topic of the video. Leave your like, share if you like the video, and lastly, don't forget to activate the little bell so you don't miss any of our daily videos. Bye-bye.